All right, welcome back to Legal Marketing Happy Hour, the podcast for legal professionals who want to unwind after a long week, learn some new tricks, and maybe share a laugh or two with a cocktail in hand. I'm your co-host, Jim Hayes, the Chief Growth Officer for Above the Bar Marketing. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, the founder and CEO, Lindsay Marty.
Welcome. I'm so excited about our guests today. Two friends and clients of ours that are two of the most, well-recognized and prestigious criminal defense lawyers in the state of Wisconsin. Anik Ahmad graduated from Cornell University and the University of Wisconsin Law School. He is admitted to practice in Wisconsin, Illinois, and the Eastern District of Wisconsin for federal court. Attorney Ahmad focuses on criminal defense, including cases involving drunk driving, drugs, firearms, and sexual assault. He is passionate about advocating for his clients and fighting racial bias in the criminal justice system. Thank you for joining us today, Anik.
Thank you for having me.
Mindy Nolan is a partner at Ahmad and Nolan Law Offices, where she has been practicing criminal defense for the past 9 years. A graduate of Marquette University Law School and the University of Wisconsin, Mindy served 5 years as Wisconsin State Public Defender. Now in private practice, she has handled a wide range of cases from minor misdemeanors and criminal traffic offenses to complex homicides and sexual assaults. Mindy is renowned for her compassionate and client-centered approach, providing personalized legal solutions that meet the unique needs of each client. Thank you for joining us, Mindy.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you for having us.
So I know both of these attorneys very well, and they're both award-winning attorneys in the state of Wisconsin. Both have been named to the Super Lawyers list by Thomson Reuters several times. Both have won Hansen Awards, which is given to attorneys that receive a non-guilty homicide in trial. And Mindy has won the KNS Award by the Wisconsin Association of Criminal Defense. This award is given to attorneys that receive a not guilty sexual assault or sensitive crime in the state of Wisconsin. So super excited to have their expertise here today and share it with you all. The topic that we're going to discuss today is revolving around the evolving landscape of criminal defense in terms of new technologies and the role of social media and how that has changed how criminal attorneys practice law. So in terms of digital forensics and advancements in surveillance tech, how is that impacting your practice in the last, several years?
Well, I think it's made it a lot more cumbersome and a lot more time intensive. The amount of discovery, meaning digital discovery, like recordings, digital forensic evidence and things of that nature. Since I started practicing law till today, I think that's increased by tenfold. And so it's a lot more time intensive of having to review all of these items, training our staff to be able to review and organize these types of things. But also in some cases, it's extremely helpful because it's been exculpatory that our clients have been able to be exonerated because of this forensic evidence that's now available to us.
Are you able to discuss or provide any case examples where you have been able to get a client a lesser sentence or, out of jail for, using this advanced technology?
Anik, did you recently have a case with one of the dismissals that you had on the drug overdose?
Yeah, so are you just talking about just general video evidence and such things? So, like over the past 10 years, right, we've gotten a lot better in terms of capacity and memory, and data. So back then, 1 or 2 gigabytes was a big deal. Now some of our cases are 200, 300 gigabytes, right? Sometimes even more than a terabyte of data. And a lot of things that you'll see are going to be every officer's body camera, which might have some little gold nuggets on it, right, that can help us in cases. But recently I've had cases, right, where we really need to analyze all the cell phone data, the evidence in that case, Snapchat videos that somehow can still be, extracted from the phone if they were saved, that can really have like be the smoking gun in the case. So one of my dismissals recently, we obtained, that we weren't provided the phones from the victim in the case, and I don't think the prosecutor even saw that. Then we requested that, and then we had to request another thing because they didn't, it wasn't complete. And then it doesn't look like they really analyzed that. So we have to analyze that and review every single Snapchat video, right? And we ended up finding things that really contradicted their theory, and in terms of what the timeline was, that it was enough to convince the state to dismiss the case, that they really didn't have a solid, theory of the case against the client, and it kind of undermined everything that they had alleged right in the complaint. We do see a lot of videos, I think, surveillance. We see a lot of that now. There are a lot of surveillance cameras and body-worn cameras. There are just hundreds of videos sometimes in a case, and we do need to review all of that to ensure that we don't miss anything that's critical. So it can go either way. Sometimes they can be a problem for clients because it's clear that's them on the camera, right? They're involved in something like a shooting, or they're at a gas station and that's their face right before something happens big in the case. Or it can also go the other way where there's really no dispute as to what occurred. So for example, in a self-defense case, sometimes it might capture that. And I think, we had a case a couple years ago. I think Mindy had a case where the DA decided not to charge the homicide because, after a lot of discussions, because the video clearly captured what the client's version of events were, right? So it can go either way.
So as I threw that question to Anik because I was still trying to think of things, but actually in both of the cases where I had won the awards, I mean, there was digital evidence that was extremely helpful in the case. In the sexual assault case, actually, police had come to interview my client at his workplace, confiscated his phone, got a search warrant for the phone. And I'm sure what their hope was is that they would be able to, get, inculpatory information or things to strengthen their case, or contraband type photos and things like that on the phone. Well, what they were actually able to find was text messages of, so I'm going to be very general about this, but text messages sort of where my client was being blackmailed by another person related to the accuser. And I ended up presenting that at trial, and I called the sender of the text messages to the stand and then confronted that person with these messages about the blackmail. And I think that was really part of the reason, why that case swung in the other direction. And then in the homicide case that I took to trial, there was some surveillance. We see a lot now actually from Ring doorbells.
Yeah.
That's commonplace.
So
there was some, evidence on a Ring doorbell of one of these people that we thought were actually, one of the potential shooters, one of the people that we were blaming of committing the homicide on the Ring doorbell with a gun. You can kind of hear in the background someone shouting that person's name. We had presented that in front of the jury as well.
Wow.
You can't get away with anything now. I mean, what happened to like doing small crimes and just being, we talk about what it was like growing up, and I feel bad for my kids because they can't get away with shit.
No, there's no more passing out cornfields, anymore.
No, I mean, we are being tracked. We are being tracked all the time, right?
Right.
And I think another thing worth mentioning on this topic is the employment, and this is very, very commonplace now in a lot of jurisdictions across the country. There's a company called Flock. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Flock.
No.
Flock is a private company that sells something called automated license plate readers to police departments. It's ALPR, ALPR. And so as we're driving down the highway, as we're driving through a city, as we're going past maybe a squad car, our license plates, all of our license plates are being put into a database. Flock will hold that database for 30 days. And after 30 days, it'll be deleted because this is a lot of data. It's actually taking pictures. And so I have a homicide case right now where there's an implication of a flock license plate, just one. I'm going to try to use that to our advantage in the case. But this is another thing that, we never saw this 10 years ago. We didn't really even see this 5 years ago.
Right.
But our license plates are all being tracked and they're put into this database that's managed by a private company.
How hard do you think it's going to be? Because this wasn't around 10 years ago, so you can only imagine how fast these technologies are going to proliferate, and what's going to be new in 5 years. You're going to look back and be like, I can't believe we're even talking about this now. Like, how hard is it to keep up with all of these new things that you can use or could be used against your client? It just seems like it's a never-ending quest.
I mean, it is. And I mean, I think it's important for a criminal defense attorney to keep on top of these new technologies. I mean, I think you need to be really adaptable and be able to understand, what the technology is. I mean, did I know about how prolific flock was being employed until I started to get these in my cases? No, because they don't talk about it. And police departments are not also disclosing like where they put these cameras. So I think that it's really important for us to really understand the technology and just have like a rudimentary understanding even of how these technologies work. And even with like cell phone downloads of how that works, because it's not as simple as just it pulls everything off the phone, right? I mean, there's certain parameters that can be set up before they do the extraction, depending on which version a law enforcement agency has of the software. Maybe you're going to get better data. Maybe you're not going to get as good of data. That data is always changing. Was it able to capture location services and things of that nature? So I think that when attorneys see something in a police report that's unfamiliar, they need to start researching it. They need to reach out to their larger brain trust, whether that be, fellow defense attorneys or, digital forensics experts.
In terms of the video technology, is there something, this is just interesting to me, because if you're getting hours and hours of video surveillance, is there a technology that you use, on a regular basis that helps you sift through all of that? Or is it really just all like manually stop and start?
Yeah, normally it's you click the file and you play it and you review it.
It is. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, most of our discoveries provided that way.
We've really trained our staff and they've gotten really good at reviewing this for us and flagging those portions that we need to go back and see. So that's kind of one way where it's taken the time off of us. Like we're not, reviewing 80 hours of, body worn camera or surveillance, but, you're able, I think, from reading a police report, to sort of focus down a time frame or a certain location, like this is what I'm looking for. But very often, what is said in the police report or not said is most helpful to our case.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys, you mentioned Snapchat earlier. Snapchat and all other social media, how often is that mentioned or as part of the defense or part of the prosecution? I mean, like, are we talking half the time, 80%?
I think it depends on the type of case. What do you think, Anik?
Like, how often do we see Snapchat and other social media apps being used?
Either
Yeah.
used against you or you're then, trying to use it in part of your defense strategy.
So it'll come up in cases where, let's say there's some sort of allegation of sexual assault. Sometimes they'll want to either subpoena those records, or if there's cases involving, drug investigations, typically they're going to see cell phones and try to see, things that are shared on social media in terms of pictures of firearms, drugs, evidence of drug dealing, things like that. So in those cases, you see it a lot. I'm sure also in homicide cases, you'll see that, but there's just a lot more drug cases that are prosecuted. That's, phone evidence is very common in those cases.
My mother-in-law, who's in an assisted living facility, her next door neighbor got her very first phone ever. And she's calling it a burner phone. And she's like 90, 91. She might be the only non-criminal I know of that has a burner phone or non-cheater.
I love that. And here's something else I think worth mentioning related to Snapchat and, well, specifically Facebook and Instagram, because now they're all under the Meta umbrella.
Mhm.
So if I send a subpoena to Meta for Facebook records, they are not going to give me those records. They only cooperate with law enforcement. They will not cooperate with the defense in the return of these records. So we might know that there's information out there, but it's extremely difficult for us to get it. So I've, been trying to think creatively of like, how can I get it? Like, can I compel law enforcement to request it on our behalf? Because I know that if I try to send a subpoena, they're not going to give it to me.
Wow, I never thought about it that way. I did not realize that they will give it to the prosecution and not the defense. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
So when you're in a case and somebody or your client is on social media all the time, do you have conversations with them on how they should, manage their online presence, especially during trial and during the case? What are those discussions like?
Well, I think we have to advise the client that, that they should stop posting, right? And, my preference is always just no activity, right? And then also if they have a public profile, to make that profile private, so everyone's not able to look at that profile. One thing that we always have to be careful of is, we can never advise a client to delete things from social media, right? Or that would be destroying evidence.
Mhm.
So, it's kind of a very careful conversation of, making these things private, but not deleting, right? But also to make sure that like they're not continuing, if there's an issue and that's kind of digging themselves in a hole, to make sure that they're not continuing that.
Okay.
Put the shovel down.
Right.
Are you able to give us like any specific examples of how, you were able to help a client get a lesser sentence or be found not guilty from, social media records and anything that you found, or vice versa, how somebody incriminated themselves?
Well, I mean, some years ago, we had a felony murder case that a lot of the conversations, our client was kind of on the periphery. And I think because of the social media posts, that what was so problematic in terms of, what led to his conviction and the conversations that were had in Messenger. I'm trying to think of something where it's been helpful to us.
I had a recent
Well, there's
where the state was asking for prison in a drug case, and they went through a phone and they played stuff to the judge at sentencing, being like, look at what he's doing on social media, judge, and he's out there dealing all these drugs, and look at taking these pictures with firearms, and look at this, it's like this automatic rifle, and you can just see a picture of the rifle in his hands. Right. So I'm like, well, judge, look at the hands very closely. You see a tattoo on that hand. My client doesn't have a tattoo on his hands. Hold up your hands in court, sir. Yeah. So like sometimes, they'll say that this is all from the defendant's phone, but it's just like a photo they received. Right.
Right.
So like you have to be able to, luckily, like we could clearly see the client's hands, but things like that. I mean, it can, you might have to even look at the metadata sometimes. Sometimes you have to have an expert to see like what is the source of these images, right? They're just because they're on someone's phone doesn't mean they took them, for example. So that was a recent one. It was kind of funny, and the judge is like, "Oh, I'm not gonna give that any weight." Yeah, he's like, "I'll take you at your word, counsel. That's not your client in the video." And ultimately, he didn't get a prison sentence. He didn't even get a day in jail.
Way to go, Johnny Cochran.
What kind of was like that, right? Hold up.
Hold them up.
It felt so good.
It was hilarious. It was kind of funny, but it was the client was ecstatic. He just walked out of the courtroom and they wanted 3 years in prison. So
amazing.
Yeah. Well, because I think also with what, defense attorneys, clients, prosecutors certainly need to understand is like when you do like these, like a phone extraction, for example, and there's all these images that they find on a phone, that doesn't necessarily mean that all those photos were taken, by that phone, by that person. I mean, there's something called the cache, and so sure you're familiar with that, CACHE. And, if something is sent, if a website is visited, if a, group chat is, scrolled through, all of those images are going to end up in the cache.
Mhm.
So it's not always as it seems. And like when I read a police report where it says, well, this image was found on this, person's phone, it's like, well, where? And where did it come from? And what's the file path? Because it's just because it's on the phone doesn't mean that it was actually taken on that phone, or, there's a whole path of access,
Mhm.
that, we as defense attorneys need to understand.
Mhm.
That's the same defense that I use when my wife goes through my phone and says, "Where did that picture come from?"
Well,
Like
you
it's in the
say,
cache.
"Leave Lisa alone.
Take it.
Leave Lisa out of this."
You're the
Um,
one that just name dropped her.
So, I mean, I can't imagine, it's overwhelming in our industry, obviously in digital marketing, to all the emerging technology every day. What is your experience so far with artificial intelligence and Gen AI? Has that impacted your practice, and in what way?
Not specifically mine yet, but I know it's coming. I
Okay.
mean, I know that the, facial recognition stuff is coming, right? Like we're seeing it a little bit, I think more in federal court, but I know that's coming. So I haven't specifically, had a case where there was some, the imposition of some AI technology. Have you, Anik?
I haven't seen it yet in the case. I've only read about AI in the legal field when a lawyer's firm or a lawyer was disciplined for using AI to do his legal research. So I think that's a big faux pas, but otherwise I haven't seen it yet in a criminal case. But I suppose, in theory, it could come up in cases involving like conversations between parties. I don't know. I'm not, I think they want to use AI to do some of the investigatory work, but yeah, I haven't seen that pop up just yet. But in legal
Yeah.
research, yeah, I certainly am very wary of doing that because as lawyers, we have to independently like make our own arguments, right? And we have to do our research, and everything we provide to a court, needs to be something that we've vetted. I think we have ethical duty to do that. So like I think there's some story from a year or two ago of some lawyers that used AI and ended up like creating fictitious cases and things that exist at all. And it's like they never even checked that. Right. So ultimately a lawyer's gotta do their due diligence. I think it could help with brief writing, but I just don't expect AI to be reliable for a very long time in the legal field.
Yeah. And I also think that the amount of time that it would take for a lawyer to go back and fact check and case cite, and then is this really what the holding was from a specific case? I don't know if it would be that efficient.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we can, I don't think we can rely on AI. I mean, we wouldn't want an AI to make medical decisions, would we? I don't think
Right.
so.
And where
Right.
where we really see it kind of crossing into the legal world is when you can develop like social media posts and use AI to write some of that content, even so much to being able to tell it to write it in a certain tone or certain dialect. If you are targeting like, white collar criminals or want to talk about white collar type of crimes, you can be very, very general here, right? And say that you're targeting somebody who may have a slightly higher education and write the post using language in a reading level that's a little bit higher versus, targeting somebody who is picked up for, selling meth on the street. Um, and actually change your voice, which sounds crazy, and I wouldn't recommend doing that, but you could literally cater the content to the type of criminal you think it might be reading this.
Yeah, what's
Yeah.
nice about, I mean, instances of AI right now, and this is something that I speak on quite a bit at state bar conventions across the country. It's most attorneys that I present to and talk to after the presentations, they're really just in that like curiosity phase. They don't trust it yet, and understandably. So, a lot of what I've found that most attorneys that I talk to use it for is just like, note taking. It can be really helpful for like summarizing conversations on video. That's why I was asking about any advanced technology for specific to video. I wonder if that would be helpful to, save some time at least while you're watching these videos, if you were able to, view the AI summaries, if they're credible, of course. And just wondering if you had seen anything like that, but.
Yeah. We do use
Well,
it
and-
somewhat for
yeah.
transcription, like of interviews to the
Okay.
audio to like get it started and and then like our paralegal will check it to see its accuracy. But yes, we have used it for that, for like having a transcript of like an interview or body camera footage.
Mhm. Yeah, I was going to mention that as well. And so we do use AI for transcripts. And sometimes what we'll do, if we'll have like a long body cam and like, let's say there's a lot of dead time, but I just want to know, like, like my spidey senses, perk. And I'm like, did something else go on here? I will run that through the AI transcription. I don't need it to be perfect, but I just need to know like where in that file, at what timestamp, like, was there some additional conversation? Was there something else said? What was the context of that? Because that then saves me time to go back and through it. And that's like the AI transcripts are very cost effective.
Okay. And what is the technology that you guys use for that? I'm sure there's.
We use rev.com. I know that there's another one, Justice Text. Is that another one?
I've spoke to Justice Text. Their platform looks really cool too.
Yeah, and I've looked at their website to see if we would want a subscription. I mean, it seems very similar to like our case management system, and I don't think like we need all of that. So we really like our case management system. But I know there's Temi.com, Rev.com, Justice Text, but those technologies are like they're very helpful because to get a court reporter to do a transcript for you, I mean, it's expensive, right? Especially from a recording.
Yeah, absolutely. When I saw Justice Text, they did a demo for me. I was pretty blown away. I'm sure they all have kind of their unique characteristics, but just the data, and I'm sure they're all like continuing to grow. AI is continuing to learn and be better. And so I hopefully, in the years to come, you guys are able to save a lot of time with some of these technologies.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to our time. Thank you guys so much for coming. I know our listeners are going to be super interested to hear more from you guys in the future. We covered a lot on emerging technologies, the use of, advanced surveillance, the social media and criminal cases. Jim, what did I miss?
Well, pretty much that we're constantly being watched and surveyed, and there's no way to get away with anything. I don't even think you could take out.
Can't go to anybody's door.
You couldn't take out one really solid tip to avoid being arrested right there. I mean, we should maybe redo this one in 6 months, and it'd just be tips and tricks to not get arrested. But like,
I think right. I think people
we-
just need to be aware that they are always being tracked. And when especially if you have a newer iPhone, look at your location services. Look where you're share what apps are you sharing location with and how often. Google is a big one. There's this other new piece called geofence warrants, where the government will request a warrant to say what Gmail accounts were in this certain so many block radius, and then does the clients show up there? So, I mean, people need to be mindful of, what data their phone or other technologies are sending out there, because
and who they're hanging out with.
Mm-hmm.
What was that?
And who they're hanging out with. I mean, geez, I could be in the geofence with a friend of mine who I know is an idiot, but I still like him. But if he's committed a crime or done like, it's guilty by association, literally.
Yeah, you're both in the fence.
Yeah.
And it's down to the second of when you close in your proximity to each other.
Right.
There's 5 people I'm not hanging out with ever again.
If you do find yourself in trouble, Anik and Mindy, their law office is Ahmad and Nolan Criminal Defense, and they are located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Their website is ahmadnolan.com, and feel free to reach out to them with any questions that you have regarding the podcast or criminal law in Wisconsin in general. And thank you so much for your time and expertise, you two. You guys are the best.
Mindy, thanks. Anik,
Yeah.
thanks.
Nice.
Appreciate it. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jim and Lindsay. Thanks
Yeah.
for having us.